Welcome to The Outlet, an NBA podcast hosted by Nick Fay and Kory Waldron.
On this episode of The Outlet, Kory and I are joined by Jay Christian to preview the NBA Finals matchup between the Los Angeles Lakers and Miami Heat. As always, you can catch The Outlet on all streaming platforms. Enjoy the show. The 2020 NBA Finals between the Los Angeles Lakers and Miami Heat are upon us, fellas. And this is a point that we didn't know we were going to get here. You know, COVID-19 and all the bubbles in the NBA having to be shut down. How do you feel about the NBA actually getting to this point and having the ability to what looks like name a champion?
I mean, I can say from my own viewpoint, because the world shut down 2 days after my birthday, and then 3 days after is when the league shut down. And as everyone, it was in 15 days we're going to reevaluate things, and then it was in another 15 days we're going to reevaluate things. And we kept getting these 2-week windows of maybe things will get better. And then all of a sudden we were, 2.5 months down the line, and you didn't know what was going to be normal again, or when things were going to get normal, especially for you and me, Nick, being so close to New York. New York was obviously the epicenter for those first additional months. And then obviously we've been really good in New York and it's gotten worse elsewhere, but it definitely felt like there wasn't going to be any sports. It just didn't seem feasible with how the infection rate was going up, how many people were dying, unfortunately, of this virus. And then, the talk started to steamroll, end of May, middle of May. And then June is when things really took off. And then we had basketball by the middle to late summer. So it definitely felt surreal. And now we're getting a untouched championship in which there won't be any fans playing a factor. And I think that's a weird part of this NBA Finals. But Jay, what do you think?
Yeah, Kory, it's funny you said use the word untouched in your opening statement, because I think back to where we were in March with Rudy Gobert touching on those microphones at the press conference, right? And then I think it was the OKC Rockets game, maybe. I can't remember which.
Utah Jazz.
OKC Utah. Right, and then it's where the league shuts down. And I always make this joke. There's Harriet Beecher Stowe wrote Uncle Tom's Cabin, and reportedly she met Abraham Lincoln, after the Civil War, during the Civil War rather, and he says, "So you're the lady who started this great war, right?" I think it's all sort of folklore, but in any event, I think about that with Rudy Gobert, right? If Rudy Gobert doesn't test positive, and the NBA doesn't take this sort of very active frontline approach to COVID, we don't have an NBA season. It's either shut down or it kind of comes back very clumsily, like we saw with baseball. Now I saw a report with football, the Tennessee Titans having to shut down their facility because some team members and staff members have tested positive. So it's crazy to think not only the chain reaction that got us to this moment, but also Rudy Gobert's positive test forcing the NBA to really evaluate, really to actually be, in a lot of ways, the leader on COVID response in the entire country, more so than the federal government, you'd argue. Once they started going into the bubble, when we first heard about a bubble, I know I thought that sounded ridiculous, but the bubble started working. Players were, Instagram photos of their room and the hotel food, and, everybody's getting their jokes off. But increasingly over time, the bubble started to work. Players showed up. We had some great games. Phoenix Suns didn't even make the playoffs. They were undefeated in the bubble. And the biggest thing with everything we're talking about with relation to the pandemic, the biggest thing was 0 positive tests, right? Throughout the course of the bubble, hundreds of people being tested rigorously every day, and to come up with 0 positive results, it's phenomenal. Forget the basketball part. Just the fact that the NBA was able to pull that off has been remarkable. I definitely think we'd be in this space back in March.
Yeah, I agree, Jay. I think that's a great point, and a lot of credit to the NBA because, like you said, they probably got things going for the U.S. as a whole. They shut down, all the other sports leagues shut down, and the next thing you know, the government actually starts to shut things down, and they've done a great job with the bubble. They had the one minor incident with Daniel House, but no COVID positive test really came out of that. So a lot of credit to them, a lot of credit to the players for staying disciplined. It's awesome that we're actually going to be here and have an NBA champion where it felt like at different points, during that break, like Kory mentioned in May and April, we didn't know what was going to happen, and it was leaning more towards a negative perspective of there just not being a champion. And we played 60 games and the season kind of being wasted. But here we are, Miami Heat versus Los Angeles Lakers. What are you guys liking in terms of storylines for the series? There's a lot of them.
I don't even want to touch on the biggest one, but obviously what is the elephant in the room, which Rachel Nichols couldn't wait to ask Eric Spoelstra, is the fact that LeBron is facing his old franchise. Obviously, it was just 4 years, but it's still one of his old franchises. Pat Riley was pretty disappointed with LeBron James leaving Miami at that point in time. So I feel like that's a storyline. It's just the Miami Heat organization versus LeBron James in a sense. And then, of course, this being a Cinderella story Miami Heat team for a lot of reasons, right? I mean, they're a 5 seed. They've made a run in this playoff series, being obviously the best team in the Eastern Conference, defeating the Milwaukee Bucks, beating the Boston Celtics. Not talking about the Pacers. That didn't count. Didn't matter. That's out of my head already. But we saw this team without a true superstar, with a star in Jimmy Butler, a budding star in Bam Adebayo, and then some really young, nice talent along with some good veterans, that it's possible to make a little bit of a run. And they kind of have those 2004 Detroit Piston vibes. Now, obviously, I think that team was way more talented, the Pistons, but this is the kind of vibes you get from this Miami Heat team. So I think those would be like the 2 biggest storylines for me.
Yeah, so I posted something on Twitter the other day, and I thought the biggest storyline, it made me think of with Riley versus LeBron, that scene out of Heat with Al Pacino and Robert De Niro where they're sitting in the diner, and De Niro's like, yeah, I like guys like you. You keep me on my toes. And De Niro's like, hey, there's another side of that coin. And then, I can't do it De Niro, so I won't. I won't even try. But I like that matchup. I like the idea of 6 years removed from having the super team and the Heatles, that the Heat are back into the finals. Now they had a really good team, and I won't asterisk a championship or appearance in the finals, but I will acknowledge that these have been unique circumstances. But yet and still, the Heat have looked like at times the best team in the bubble, and so I think the other side of all these big threes and these super teams is what's the aftermath, right? What do these teams look like after this time is done, after the champagne's not flowing anymore? What comes next? And Riley, after the 2014 finals, when LeBron's free agency was pending, he said, look, you don't go duck and run. You don't hide. You rebuild, you get back on the horse, and you come do it again. Having had all those wars in the 80s with the Lakers and Celtics, that, was sort of the jib that Pat Riley was cut from. And so I like the idea of him sort of being they have a very sort of icy relationship, Riley and LeBron do. And I think that's a part that I think Riley has said and been on record that he basically thought, LeBron James kind of cut and run in Miami when they had something really good going on. Now, of course, LeBron's instincts turned out to be right, because I think Wade was pretty much shot, and Chris Bosh, of course, had a heart condition no one knew about at the time. But Riley was ready to reload. That didn't work out, so that animus there is story number 1. For me, the second story is LeBron being sort of the Jon Snow of the NBA, embracing his enemy, Frank Vogel, after years of dismantling the Pacers while he was with the Miami Heat, actually getting Frank Vogel to the finals. That's the second biggest. No, I'm kidding. That's not the story at all. I just wanted to say that because Kory was on the phone.
That's a good one. I'm glad you made mention to it. I mean, I'm really happy that LeBron's paying it back to Frank Vogel.
You guys can't see Kory's face right now, but he's smiling.
I actually am. It's true.
But really, really quick. I mean, I think the second story is just, I think for me, is LeBron's embrace of being a Laker and into the Laker family. Now, I think you could argue a lot of circumstances accelerated that, namely the untimely tragic death of Kobe Bryant and Gigi and all the other folks on that helicopter flight, and LeBron were taking the lead as the voice for the Lakers. But I think when he first arrived in LA, I mean, we looked at how that roster was constructed by Magic, and you got Lance Stevenson on the team, and you're like, what the hell is this? It didn't really feel right. Like a lot of people, I think rightfully so in some respects, thought LeBron was just there for the next phase, there to be in LA for the next phase of his career, Hollywood, and, eventually trying to be an owner, and just didn't really seem like he was sort of quote unquote basketball focused. But I think this year and this experience with Kobe Bryant's death and time in the bubble, I think he's really started to put his stamp on Laker history. And if he brings banner number 17, I think he sort of solidifies his place as a Laker great in just 2 seasons.
Yeah, I mean, you guys pretty much named all the storylines. You have the Spoelstra, Pat Riley versus LeBron, obviously. And like you said, Jay, LeBron buying into that LA legacy. And then also I think like another storyline is just LeBron in general of like this possibly being his last shot at a championship or his last time being in the finals. I don't think it's a given next year that the Lakers are going to be so much better than the other teams or the other teams contending. And LeBron's going to be up there in age. He's going to be 36. And I think during this postseason run, we saw some of that age show where he couldn't be the same guy every single night, every single quarter. I expect him to be at that level in the finals, but during the postseason run, it was a little bit harder for him. So I think that's something. And then maybe AD kind of taking the lead role from LeBron, maybe transitioning to that in the finals could be something we could also see. And on the Heat side, I think you also have to look at the Jimmy Butler thing, where people were saying this guy can't be a leader. He can't lead a team, all that stuff. And, Minnesota, Philadelphia, Chicago, and now look where he is now. And then Spoelstra, I think, continuing to ascend in terms of like the coaching ranks and the respect. I think we all here thought that Spo was a top 5 coach, but the way he's coaching this postseason run, it's hard to argue that he's not currently the best coach in the NBA during this postseason. So a lot of fun storylines along, the Heat and the Lakers. And I'm sure there'll be even more that kind of pop up from the small things of Rajon Rondo back in the finals, Dwight Howard back in the finals, all these young players and Tyler Hero popping off for the Heat. There's just a lot of fun things to kind of keep an eye on in this series. But let's talk about some of those matchups. And we obviously got to start with the biggest name, LeBron James. How are the Heat going to defend him?
So this is the first series in the playoffs, or this playoff run, in which LeBron's got multiple guys that can be thrown at him defensively. Obviously, he's seeing a familiar face in Andre Iguodala. This is now Andre Iguodala's 6th straight year in the NBA Finals as well, which is pretty damn impressive. And obviously, as we know from those clashes between the Warriors and Cavaliers, this was a guy that was frequently guarding LeBron James and had some success early on. Obviously, I think because Iggy's a little bit older, I don't think he's going to have the same type of success versus LeBron, even though LeBron's older. But then you still have Jay Crowder, who's a big body, physical guy, and then Jimmy Butler, who is a top-notch defender. Now, granted, I don't think any of those guys are the best matchups in terms of guarding LeBron James. But again, having multiple guys you can throw at LeBron is always a plus for your team. And I think that's something that sticks out right away from Miami compared to the teams that the Lakers have faced to this point.
All 3 guys have postseason experience defending LeBron.
Yeah.
Be it Butler with the Bulls, Jay Crowder with the Celtics, and like you mentioned, Kory Andre Iguodala with the Warriors. That's something to kind of keep an eye on, too. They kind of have an idea of what he's going to do. And honestly, I think the 4th name that they could throw at him would be Bam Adebayo. Like, I think at different points in the series, that wouldn't be the worst idea, especially if Anthony Davis isn't on the floor. But, Jay, what are you thinking?
I think I was going to go a totally different direction, but when you mentioned that last point about Bam, it's something I thought about just now. It's like, I don't know, and this may take the conversation in a different direction, but I don't know if I saw. I mean, there were games, I think, against Houston, and there were games against Denver where Anthony Davis asserted himself on the block. But there were times where he'd have 1 rebound or 2 rebounds, and he'd start. I remember watching the game so much, and he starts so high in the action on the half court. Like he started at the elbow extended. He's never just sort of, paint under my feet. I'm on the block, a la Barkley, a la Shaq, and I'm just going to punish guys, right? And I just wonder. It kind of reminds me a little bit of LeBron in, I think, 2011 Finals, a little bit of Durant. And so just with your comment about Bam, I wonder if Miami doesn't throw some different looks at the Lakers and say, look, we could probably put Jay Crowder on Anthony Davis for some minutes, right? So it doesn't have to be just a straight Bam Anthony Davis matchup, because Bam or Anthony Davis to me hasn't shown. I just hadn't seen the propensity to say. And Barkley made this point, I think, sort of like basically that Davis is a good kid, a nice guy, but that quote unquote dog, like I'm just going to go down here and get 40 and 20, and this is just what it's going to be tonight. And you're in for a long fucking night, Houston, Denver, whoever. I mean, he comes out and he does it in spurts. But if I'm Spo, I say, you know what? We could probably steal minutes with Jay Crowder on Anthony Davis, especially if he's going to catch the ball 20 feet from the basket. And Bam could disrupt some things for LeBron. So I'm sorry, that takes it off of what we're talking about. But I just thought about that matchup. That could be a wrinkle they throw at LeBron James for at least portions of the game, I think.
Yeah, I think it's all correlated, just how they kind of deal with those 2 guys, because the way you look at the Lakers, there's really only 2 big offensive threats in LeBron and Anthony Davis. And I think based off of what we saw from Miami, if I'm the Heat, I'm running my zone a ton in this series. I'm
Yep.
saying, please let me see Alex Caruso, Rajon Rondo, KCP, who shot well, Danny Green shoot over 40% from three for a series. I'm just going to lock down the paint. That's where Davis likes to get his buckets. That's where LeBron likes to get his buckets most of the time. Occasionally, you'll have that hot game, but I think if I'm then, I'm just really focusing on locking down the paint, and it just really eliminates a lot of the things that the Lakers want to do. And the only way to really disrupt that is obviously great cutting and hitting your open threes. But if I'm Spo, I think that's what I'm trying to leaning on, especially early in the series. Like, I want to see these guys hit their threes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right. I think that's right, and that's what we talked about with the Western Conference Finals preview. Right? Is like, are these guys going to hit shots? I don't think.
And they didn't.
To borrow a line. Yeah, they didn't. I was going to give Danny Green a little bit of a compliment. I thought he was the compliment to still line from Major Payne. He was a shit sandwich. He just wasn't a soggy one, I think. But yeah, there were shot. I mean, there were flashes, but I think that's the blueprint. You say, okay, if somehow KCP walks away with Finals MVP, okay, fine. That's what it is, right? That's what
I'll take the L.
I'll take the L. But yeah, I want to see these guys make shots. I want to see LeBron give the side eye when they miss 3 in a row and see how that affects him, right? I mean, Spo knows better than anybody. LeBron spent years yelling at Mario Chalmers when he went hitting shots, right? So, yeah, I think that's the way I would approach it too from a schematic standpoint. I think a lot of zone. I think it's going to be zone heavy. The Miami Heat have the conditioning and the ability and the bodies, quite frankly, to run that at extended clips during the game. And let's see if some of these guys can hit shots.
Yeah, and I think just looking at the numbers from the previous series, we had Kyle Kuzma shooting 29% from three, Danny Green shooting 32%, Alex Caruso shooting 15%. Oof. Rondo did shoot 45%. Those were completely wide open looks. KCP has really been the only guy consistently knocking down threes for the Lakers, it feels like, at this point in the postseason. You get a couple spurts from Anthony Davis, but that's just really what you got to go with. And I think given Spoelstra and his ability to adjust and kind of throw out these different schemes is going to be huge. And then also the pieces that the Heat have on their roster in comparison to what Denver has in terms of defensive pieces is going to play a factor in the series. Like, they can just give you so many different looks and force you to do different things, where I felt like Denver was limited because really their two best players in Nikola Jokic and Jamal Murray are minus defenders, where the Heat can put out plenty of lineups and not kind of lose that. And even guys like Tyler Hero, who's not a great defender, he can at least hold his own, or at least he did in that Boston series.
Right. He works in the scheme for sure.
Yep.
I think and I think that's to your point. I think 1 through 8, and maybe all the way down the roster. I mean, you can get minutes from Iggy. Who's my man that looked like he's been in the cave.
Solomon Hill.
So you might steal 2 minutes from Solomon Hill. I mean, it's just you can actually look down the bench and say, okay, how do I steal a minute here, steal a minute there? And just to your point, Nick, I think there are more bodies to do that and more capable of what the Miami Heat is locked into. Someone made a great point. They said Miami kind of reminded them of sort of Syracuse in that matchup zone a little bit.
Yeah.
They run all the time with Jim Boeheim. I think that was accurate.
Something that's like, I'm just thinking about now, like something that could benefit the Lakers would be like Bam Adebayo getting in foul trouble.
Yeah.
Like in this series in particular, like the Lakers have that benefit in regards to the Celtics didn't have multiple front court players that you could throw at Bam successfully. Whereas the Lakers, obviously, Dwight Howard's coming off a fantastic series. Obviously, we know what Anthony Davis brings, and JaVale McGee is probably just going to be in there to be, just to be a body at times. But you get Bam in trouble. That's an area I think that benefits the Lakers, especially outside of the fact of they need obviously their role players to step up. But I think that's one area in which the Heat haven't been accustomed to that yet in this playoff necessarily, is a lot of different bodies being thrown at Bam.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. I think fouls will be an X factor, which we'll talk about a little bit later, because I think you can look at the Lakers side too, and Dwight and McGee, both guys kind of prone to fouling, and we saw how good the Heat were against Boston in terms of getting in the bonus and kind of using that to get some offense. But just one final note on the defensive stuff. I think Duncan Robinson will be able to be hidden a little bit easier in this series too, because if you're running that zone, it's not going to be like, hey, LeBron can just call for a ball screen and Duncan Robinson is going to have to kind of switch on him, where you can just kind of throw Duncan Robinson on the wing or in the bottom of the zone and not really have to worry about him getting exposed as much, because Alex Caruso, KCP, Danny Green, just guys that aren't necessarily going to attack you in those one-on-one situations. It's more about, keeping your head on a swivel and watching for those backdoor cuts and all those screens. But how do you expect them to defend AD?
I mean, AD is going to get a lot of Bam Adebayo. Obviously, that's going to be the primary defensive matchup the Heat throw at him. And
do you think Bam is the best guy to defend AD in the entire league?
I mean, I would say probably, yeah, because he's probably one of the most lateral, quick bigs out there, with great wingspan, great recovery time. Yeah,
he's probably stronger than AD.
Yeah, I would probably say yes. I mean, though, I'm trying to think of like who else I would want on
Siakam maybe.
Giannis would be someone I would think.
Oh yeah, Giannis. Yeah, if Giannis was out there for sure. Yeah, I think probably Giannis, Bam. Who'd you say, Jay?
Pascal Siakam.
Yeah, Pascal Siakam's not a bad choice either. He's got good wings.
I like Siakam too. I think his quickness, he's a little pesky. But the thing with Siakam, and the only thing that would hurt him is when he had to do so much offensively this year, he wasn't able to focus as much defensively. And I felt like last year he was a better defensive player. We got that guy in AD. I think that'd be a good matchup, like Jay said.
Yeah, I can't think of anyone else. I mean, obviously Bam's going to be the primary guy. And outside of Bam, I mean, you're going to have to go small and have it be Crowder, right? Just for like strength wise, because I mean, I don't think Kelly Olynyk has much of a place in this series, or Derrick Jones Jr., who we didn't see much of any if in the last series. So that's like an area that I think Miami is slightly not slightly. When you look at the top players in this series, it's LeBron, AD, and then from like 3 to 6 or 3 to 7 might be all Miami Heat players. But the mismatch for Anthony Davis is pretty heavy in this one.
Yeah, I think keeping Bam on him is going to be huge, unless they're in that zone. And I think the zone is going to allow them to have a little success in terms of defending him. Anthony Davis has improved as a passer. He's a good passer from the big position, but still the different looks that Miami throws at you just makes it a little bit more difficult. And I think even Jimmy Butler might be on AD for certain spans during the game, depending on what types of happen. And I think you'll be forced to play Kelly Olynyk at different points, just given how big LA is. And if Bam does get in foul trouble, I'd be surprised if they dust off Myers Leonard. They haven't played him the entire bubble, but this would be a series if you were going to play him, pull him out now. Andre Iguodala would probably spend a little time on Anthony Davis just because they play so small, but the Heat definitely help better than most teams in the NBA. The rotations are very good, especially when they're locked in. So I'm not as worried about like the one-on-one matchup. It's going to be like multiple looks, and it's going to be up to AD and LeBron to kind of diagnose those looks and see what they can do to make sure they're putting themselves and their teammates in a good position.
Yeah, and if AD, like I said a second ago, if he settles, then you can if he makes the job easier and by, turnaround jump shots or, like I said, initiating the action, 15, 20 feet away from the bucket, you can still, like I say, you can still minutes with Jay Crowder, you can get some with Jimmy Butler, and you can move things around, and then all of a sudden, LeBron James is looking at a, 6'9", 6'10" Bam Adebayo, matched up with him. So, I think it's scheme, but like I say, help defense is fantastic. The zone's been looking good in the bubble. So, I think it'll be important for AD to really force the bigs to play him. And but what I mean by that is being aggressive, being around the basket. If he doesn't like what he sees, kick it out to Rondo, repost, and really trying to live in the paint. And making you have to pull a Myers Leonard, Myers Leonard, right?
Yep.
Right. Yes. Okay, sorry. Myers Leonard off the bench. Kelly Olynyk, like make those guys have to get minutes in the series, right? But if AD's gonna, start away from the paint or shoot jump shots or shoot 3-pointers, then Jay Crowder can face up, 20 feet from the basket and just get help and have Bam Adebayo is a sort of like a free safety on the defense, sort of anchor. Yep. So, I think it all depends on. It'll be a reaction to how AD starts the series. I think if AD's is out thinking himself as a 4, as a 6'11" guard, then that's not how he's helping the Lakers. But if he's in the paint, sort of imposing his will offensively and defensively, then I think that makes things interesting.
I think you hit it before, Jay. You said AD was really good in spurts, and that was the thing. Kory and I talked about it a lot in the Western Conference Finals recaps. Is like, Anthony Davis just went off for 27 points in what it felt like either the second half or the first half, or majority of points came in that one section. Then other points of the game he kind of disappeared. And not to say that he can't do it the whole game. It's just that you want to see that mentality, that aggressiveness, especially in a matchup where your team needs you to be that. And another thing for Anthony Davis against this zone, or depending on who they match up against him, he's got to attack the offensive boards. Like, the weakness of a zone is boxing out, because it's harder to put bodies on people and it's more of a group setting. And if Anthony Davis is the tallest guy, most athletic guy on the court, he should be able to get some of those offensive rebounds, or at least some of those tip outs we see from a lot of those, skinny centers in the NBA.
100%. We saw that as an area the Celtics just couldn't manage to win more times than not in the last round, was on the boards.
Yeah, and we do give some credit to Miami's guards and Tyler Hero, Goran Dragic, Jimmy Butler, Duncan Robinson, Jay Crowder, all those guys. I thought they did a really nice job from the guard position rebounding. But in terms of flipping the switch, how do you expect LA to defend the Heat? Is there any specific thing that you think they're going to do to slow them down? Obviously, we're not talking about one of the most explosive offenses in the NBA, but still have the ability to score from multiple levels of the floor and multiple players on the floor.
I mean, I think you want to run them off the three-point line.
Yeah.
Obviously, you look at the 3-point percentage between the teams. Miami was the best regular season 3-point percentage team. Didn't necessarily get the most looks up, but this is a team that's predicated on floor spacing, moving the basketball, and finding the open shooter. So, and we've also seen in the last series, especially, what happens when the shooting dips for Miami, and how much harder it is for them to win a game and stay in a game and come back when they don't have that shooting. And of course, the shooters they're relying on are kids, right? Tyler Hero, Duncan Robinson, rookies, young guys as their best 3-point shooters. And then Jay Crowder, at this point in time, is cold from deep still. He didn't get it going the rest of that series. Goran Dragic had a good 2 first games of the series. He got cold near the second half of the series. So the fact of the matter is, you're going to be relying heavily on young guys. And I think if you're the Lakers, you want Miami to at least depend on those young guys. See if they get rattled on the biggest stage. See if, as Paul Pierce says, like, the young guys in this league nowadays, they're scared of LeBron. Maybe that's going to be a factor in this. But I think if you're the Lakers, you want to scare off Miami from taking threes. You want them to drive, because again, the Lakers have some of the best rim protecting bigs in the league right now. So you're going to want to have Miami trying to drive. Now, granted, you don't want to get in foul trouble, but I think ideally you want to get them off the 3-point line.
Jesus, Paul Pierce, I just can't. They won't let it go. That fucking Celtics team will not let it go. Jesus Christ, I can't even. God,
Jay was really animated about that one.
Paul Pierce just thinks that he's like an all-time top 5 player when he's not. Like, he thinks that he's in the same conversation as LeBron and Kobe Bryant when he's just not that guy.
I got a take on it. I don't know why. Because he's got one of the best nicknames of all time. Think about this. If your nickname is the truth, come on. It's a really good nickname for a guy who probably is only like a top 50 player of all time, top 40 player of all time, even if he's probably not even that high, is he?
Well, you say top 5. I mean, I was going to say I don't know if he's top 5 Celtic even, but I mean, I guess
yeah.
I'll put him over the old school guys, except for Russell, right? I don't know, Bill Sharman, sorry, but Paul Pierce is better. But there's still Larry Bird, there's still Kevin McHale, there's still Dave Allen, et cetera, et cetera. But anyway, the petty and the slander, just let it go. Yeah, I agree with what Kory said. That's why I was so dismissive of Paul Pierce, because Kory was on point. Running him off the 3-point line. It's weird. I felt as though earlier in the bubble and in the playoffs, I thought Jimmy Butler was more aggressive offensively. Yep. I feel like he's not looking for a shot as much definitely in the Boston series, and even a little bit in the round prior to that with Milwaukee, where I think he definitely had some bigger moments. But I don't know if he's looking to facilitate or he's just kind of I've seen him more aggressive in the past, and it just doesn't seem like he's looking for his shot. And maybe that's good in a way, that he's not trying to get outside of himself and outside the flow of the offense. But there are stretches where Miami was super cold in the Boston series, could get a bucket, and I think there were just times where they just needed – and there were times Jimmy did put his head down and get that bucket, but I don't know. What do you guys think? He didn't seem as aggressive last round.
I actually have a question off that, but I'll just to answer you first. You're 100% right, because especially in the Milwaukee Bucks series, it looked like Jimmy just had more of a get up in him. Like it was like he really wanted
He
that.
popped up the first 2 games and then he kind of cooled off after game 3.
Right. And you made this tweet, I think it was you, Nick, how you tweeted Jimmy Butler wearing the Tyler Hero jersey and how he's just boosting up these guys' confidence. Maybe that's kind of like the game. I'm not saying this is for sure the case, but maybe that's kind of the game plan for Jimmy Butler this past round, is making sure he gets other guys confident, so when they get into a situation like this against the Lakers, where they have the biggest name in basketball, LeBron James and Anthony Davis, that these guys have a lot more confidence. So maybe he's trying to play the long game, but I don't know if it's that deep.
I think that'd be a little of a stretch, just because I don't know if the Heat anticipated being there, but I agree with the point of encouraging these young players and kind of fill them up with confidence. And I think it even is not as much the long game, but even from game to game, Jimmy knowing that he's not one of the best scorers in the NBA. He's not like a guy that's going to average 30 points a game. That's just kind of not who he is anymore. His jump shot isn't amazing, but I agree with Jay in the sense that in some of these half-court sets that the Lakers are going to force them in, probably more than the Celtics, because I don't anticipate the Lakers turning over the ball as much as Boston did against that zone. LeBron's a little bit, too smart and experienced to be giving you the ball, 5 times for some easy layups down the stretch. So Jimmy's going to have to be better. He's going to have to be more impactful in those half-court sets and getting buckets, especially against some of the matchups he's going to have. He's going to be going against Danny Green. He's going to be going against KCP, Alex Caruso, Rajon Rondo, probably Kyle Kuzma. I don't even think he'll see LeBron that much in this series. So, there's going to be opportunities for Butler to really score, but also I think he knows that he's not necessarily that level of scorer, and maybe he has to depend on Tyler Hero and Goran Dragic a little bit more.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's right, and I think, they just need him. They need him to keep the defense honest, right? I think that's right. I think he just, he just got to be a little more aggressive than what he has been. I think in the Eastern Conference Finals, I think it's just vital for. Kory, to your point, who knows how. I mean, so far, Tyler Hero and Doug Robinson haven't seemed like he had any problem with the stage, but NBA Finals is another level. Despite what Paul Pierce says,
I feel like the bubble makes it easier.
You think? Yeah, I would say that too. Right. No, yeah, I think that's right. I would agree with that.
Because you don't have 18,000 fans screaming at you, booing you, or you don't feel the finals. It almost kind of, not to take anything away from it, it almost just feels like another game in the bubble to them.
So I think that's a great point. I wanted to bring this up. I think the no fans has benefited the Miami Heat more than any other team in this bubble. Simply based off of their mentality and their mindset, because they're such a gritty, grinded out team that not having the fans that could swing momentum of a game, it may hurt them at times too, don't get me wrong, but I think it's benefited them more than any other team because of just how they've kind of approached the bubble and approached this entire restart.
They can generate their own energy, and you've seen teams throughout the bubble not be able to do that. I think Milwaukee was a team where not having the Clippers too, not having this home crowd, you saw the more talented team lose. And that doesn't typically happen, especially in a 7-game series. But I think a lot of that is the bubble. And I think for young guys, like we saw Jamal Murray pop off against the Lakers and in the other series against the Clippers too, it's a little easier to do without the outside pressure. And I think that's a reason we saw Tyler Hero continue to get better, where it almost feels like in the past, you don't necessarily see young guys get better in the postseason because they're dealing with the pressure and the outside noise that they're having to face, where just a little bit different in this situation where you could focus just on basketball.
No Jimmy Butler note, he hasn't made a 3-pointer since game 1 of the Eastern Conference Finals.
Love it.
Interesting. I think he shot 16% in the series. And just to go over the 3-point shooting for Miami, which felt like they shot better, but they really didn't. Andre Iguodala shot 42%, Duncan Robinson 40%, Tyler Hero only shot 34%, Derek Jones Jr., who barely played like Kory mentioned, 33%, Goran Dragic 33%, Jay Crowder all the way down to 25% on almost 8 attempts a game, Kelly Olynyk 20%, Kendrick Nunn 20%, Jimmy Butler 16, Bam 0, Solomon Hill didn't attempt one. So not really promising numbers. And it's almost kind of in comparison to the Lakers, but the Lakers have Anthony Davis and LeBron James to provide that scoring where, Miami has a whole bunch of other guys that can score, but then none of them can score at the level in which AD and LeBron can.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it'll be interesting to see how they generate the offense. And like Kory hinted at earlier, and Jay, you mentioned pushing them off the three-point line and trying to force them in the paint against those rim protectors, be it Dwight Howard, be it JaVale McGee, and be it Anthony Davis, and even LeBron, who I thought has been very good as a weak side rim protector at different points in the playoffs. But anything else in terms of how the Lakers are going to defend the Heat or what the Heat should try to do offensively to get things going? Is there anything you'd like to see from Miami to kind of kick things off or a specific area to attack the Lakers?
Well, Miami's goal has got to be the in and out game, right? You have to attack the basket. Jimmy Butler head down, Bam getting aggressive in the paint, find the cutters and Jay Crowder and Tyler Herro, who's actually an underrated cutter, I think. But getting to the basket, trying to get the Lakers in foul trouble to make them defend the paint a little bit more to hopefully open up some shooters in Duncan Robinson and Tyler Herro, and hopefully Jay Crowder and Goran Dragic can get it going. But I think ideally you need to attack the paint, and again that's where they won the series against Boston, right? Like we mentioned, they didn't shoot overly well, but they were aggressive. They got to the paint, and obviously the Celtics didn't have great rim protection. They got Daniel Tice in foul trouble multiple games, but that's got to be the same type of mindset for the Miami Heat, even though you're battling a team with much better defending bigs.
Yeah, it'll be important to hit the threes because you want to really pull those bigs out and prevent them from being able to kind of close down the paint. And I think one thing we saw a lot in Game 6 with Bam is running the offense, being the focal point. And what that does, especially when he's at the elbow, that pulls Anthony Davis or pulls Dwight Howard out of the paint. So now all of a sudden that cutter has a free rim where maybe they have to just beat an undersized guy or just make a contested layup, which these guys have shown the ability to do.
Sure.
So it'll be intriguing to see how Miami generates the offense because, like I mentioned, I don't think the fast break points that they got against Boston are really going to be there. And it'll be interesting to see how some of these young guys play.
I would also say, we didn't touch on it, but I think the coaching matchup in this series is pretty important for the fact of we kind of already know who Eric Spoelstra is, or at least we all believe him to be, a great, fantastic coach. I know Bomani Jones was on Twitter today saying, let's chill and stop saying he's like a Hall of Fame coach yet, because he's never won more than 50 games without LeBron James, which I think is
he's never had a team that should win more than 50
games.
Right.
Again, you look at the teams he's had, he's won like 48 games or 49 games with teams that were definitely not that talented or not super talented, and had no stars. But Bomani Jones in some kind of haterade this afternoon. But I think
go ahead.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
Go ahead.
What you got?
I was just gonna say just the funny and I would say two things, right? One, I was going to say context matters, and narrative matters, but I was going to say shout out to Ramon Shelburne for that, right? But it's funny if you said just objectively, right? If you said, okay, because the argument is, I guess, with Bomani Sweets, I didn't see him, but I heard him on his podcast talking about this. If the argument is, yeah, he only won because he had LeBron James, D Wade, Chris Bosh. Okay, this is his 5th trip to the finals. Give me the list of other coaches who have either A, won multiple championships, or B, been to the finals 5 times. And I guarantee you that list, with 5 trips to the finals, let's go with that. I guarantee you that coach in those championship seasons coached 3 or more Hall of Famers. I promise it's Red Auerbach, it's Pat Riley, it's Phil Jackson. It's weird sometimes when guys are like, well, because he had good players. It's like, yes, we know, right?
Good players typically win championships.
It all kind of fits. So it's like, well, he didn't do shit without LeBron James. Like, right. And then now be Michael Jordan. Now be Bill Russell. You know what I mean? Like, yes. Now, the whole 50 wins game, flip that over. Flip that over. How many 50-win seasons has Coach Bud had? How many 50-win seasons has Dwayne Casey had, right? Are those guys Hall of Famers over Spo? Like, are you making that argument with a straight face? I'm not saying this is what Bomani is saying, but if you extrapolate what his point is to its end conclusion is, okay, so it's like when you have a passer who stayed in the NFL, a quarterback stayed like 20 years and just has all these stats. Well, he threw for 600,000 yards. It's like, yeah, shit, he's been here since the 80s. Yes, he did. That did happen. Now, was he better than Barry Sanders? Yes or no? Is Emmitt Smith better than Barry Sanders, right? Like, I don't know. That's just a funny argument to point out the obvious. But Kory, I went way off base.
No, that was good. There are some fallacies clearly in his argument.
And I think also the fact that he did it all with the Heat. Like, he didn't go to another team where I think it's more likely to make another trip to the finals if you join another squad. You know what I mean? And it's like he stayed with the Heat. He turned a lot of these players into something. And let's not forget, the Heat never really fully out-tanked. They never had a pick, I believe, higher than 10th. they turned, Tyler Hero into something. Duncan Robinson was an undrafted guy. Like Jay Crowder all of a sudden is playing like an NBA player again. Like there's just a lot of things going on with Miami that
Let me
leads to
tell
the
you
coach
what. Oh,
and the
sorry.
coaching staff. No, go ahead,
I
Jay.
was just going to say real quick. Let me tell you, the move for the Miami Heat is not being back in the finals since LeBron James. It's being back in the finals since giving their money to Dion Waiters and my man Hassan Whiteside.
Yeah.
Like, to your point, Nick, how they got out of that shit and somehow were able to rebuild on the fly. That's impressive. That's
Not
the part.
even those two. You forgot James Johnson and Tyler Johnson.
Ah, God, yes. That's the cool part. Like, forget the.
That's like $80 million right there.
Yeah.
Right. That's the part where Riley gets my respect, because holy shit, those are some bad contracts.
I remember thinking 2 years ago, like, what the hell are the Heat doing giving these guys contracts, and like they're not a championship level team, and the fact that they were able to get out of them, and Pat Riley was able to trade Hassan Whiteside this past offseason with like nobody wanted his contract, and he was able to get that off so he'd have enough money to get Jimmy Butler. It was pretty incredible stuff, and I think he gets a lot of credit. But getting back to the coaching matchup, this might be, other than the fact that the Heat have more good players across the board and they don't have necessarily the top two elite guys, the coaching matchup is huge for them because Vogel's a great coach, but I'm not sure if he's on Spoelstra's level.
Right, and that's kind of what I was going at for a little tangent, which I loved, is the fact of like this is almost a more important series for Frank Vogel than maybe anyone else. You can make an argument because
other than LeBron.
Right. I mean, you can make the case has been like it's been a cakewalk, right? They've walked to the NBA Finals, which is, everyone's favorite thing to do when LeBron's got something easy. It's, oh, look, he's doing it again. It's easy. The West isn't that hard. See, look at it. It's all fake. But Vogel now is being tested to see what kind of coach he is. Can he adjust against a top flight coach in Eric Spoelstra? How does he adjust to the zone defense that's probably going to be thrown at his team? So Vogel now on the biggest stage of his coaching career, how does he gauge the moment? How does he adapt? How does he get guys going? So it's a really interesting matchup in terms of both of these coaches. But I think there's a lot of pressure on Vogel because, again, too, we saw coaches underneath LeBron have like a short window. David Blatt, they went to the NBA Finals. Next year he got canned. So I think that's also, not that I think Vogel's going to get fired, and I hope he doesn't, but I think that's like an interesting like side story that could come out of depending on how this finals turns out.
100%. And I think it's like the pressure's on. Like he's the favorite in the series. He has the two best players in the series. The expectation is to win. And if they were to lose this series, there would be a possibility of him being let go. I don't think it would happen, but it would be a conversation that they would have in the LA organization.
Yeah, no, I I guess I would just say that, I think with Spo, and we were kind of talking about him a second ago, but I thought he did a great job last series against Brad Stevens, just making the right moves. I think one thing that I really appreciate about how Spo coaches is I think he's really good at making the adjustments on the fly. Like I think he's really good in getting those, there's something that a different look, a different wrinkle we want to show. I don't think I feel as strongly about that as Coach Vogel. I think Vogel's good X's and O's, but I kind of like Spoelstra's ability to make those in-game adjustments a little bit more. I mean, that's a little, kind of venturing on nerd talk a bit, but I feel sometimes I watch the Lakers and I feel as though they're staying with the set piece, or staying with the offensive strategy, or staying with defensive strategy a player too long, right? I don't know. In terms of in-game adjustments, I think I give that advantage to Spo if we're doing sort of tail of the tape between the head coaches.
Yeah, and I will say this too, and Kory kind of hinted at it. Like the Lakers haven't had to really worry about losing series or being at such a talent disadvantage, where the Heat have been at a talent disadvantage against both the Bucks and the Celtics, and they were able to make the adjustments. And really, the Heat pretty much won every close game in that series, like because of adjustments they made in the fourth quarter, the defenses they ran, or Spo sticking with the zone even when I felt like at times maybe he should have got away with it. But I will give Vogel some credit too, because I thought he made some really nice adjustments against the Rockets and not playing McGee and not playing Dwight Howard and saying, hey, let's go small. And then even against Denver, starting Dwight. But those are not in-game adjustments. Those are more of, hey, let's study the film and see where we're at type of stuff, like you were kind of hinting at, Jay. Before we get to X factors, Kory kind of mentioned this, and I wanted to do this exercise. Let's rank the top 10 players in the series, and I think we'll all agree LeBron is number 1, Anthony Davis is number 2, Jimmy Butler number 3, Bam Adebayo number 4.
No, I think you're wrong. I think I'd say Bam is third at this point, and Jimmy's fourth. I think it's flipped right now. Any arguments?
I think in the last series, Bam was better, but I would still say over the bigger picture of things, like Jimmy's still the guy. And I think I'm always gonna give like a little credit to somebody who's like in charge of running things, or like when things gets tough, like they go to Jimmy Butler a little bit more. But we did see Bam in Game 6 take over, so I think you could say whatever 3-4 is a tie. I would take that.
Interesting. Because
what do you got, Jason? This is interesting.
Because I was thinking of it as, in my head, I was thinking of it like sort of historically, right? Like who's the better player? And I was going. My initial thought was Jimmy, but you raise an interesting point because going into this series, I mean, but then this kind of jumbles up the top 10 a bit because if I was going to say going into the series, I'd say Bam. But if you're doing that game, then, I mean, there's almost an argument for Tyler Hero over Jimmy Butler if you're doing it that way, right? Which I don't think Tyler Hero is a better player than Jimmy Butler as we stand here today. But as this matchup, I'm going to go Jimmy. I'm staying Jimmy, though. But it's interesting. I paused. I paused for a minute. But
I think what gives you the possibility of Bam is his defensive impact, because I also Butler had a lot of steals and a lot of like deflections and stuff, but I wasn't very impressed by his on-ball defense on Jason Tatum at certain points in the series, where I was like highly impressed with Bam throughout the series on switches, wherever it might be. So, but if it came like push came to shove, I'd probably say Jimmy Butler is still a little bit better player at this point, but maybe going to next year, I think Bam might surpass him, and that's great for the Heat. But who do we have at number 5? As the 5th best player in the series currently right now and the way they're playing?
So for me, I'm just going to say like 5 through 7, I think are all Miami Heat players. The ranking them is the hard part because I almost want to say it's Tyler Hero coming off the series he just had. But I still think, despite Goran Dragic not shooting super well last series, he still provides decent rebounding from the garbage. He still playmaking, and I feel like he's still an important part of this Heat team. So I feel like you have to say Dragic is 5, Tyler Hero.
Over Rondo?
Rondo? Yeah, you saw that tweet I had the other day, right? I was kind of like, I was a little high on Rondo.
You're watching some highlights.
I had to go for a walk. I think I got contact high from someone else, possibly. I don't know. Like that Michael Scott scene from The Office, if you know what I'm talking about.
I do.
So I think I would say Tyler Hero. I think it was Goran Dragic and Tyler Hero, and then Jay Crowder would be my 5 through 7.
Wow. Okay. Nick,
yeah, I think I like that. I think the order, like you said, Kory, could fluctuate in terms of, Dragic and Hero and Jay Crowder probably being down there. And then honestly, it gets tough. Like, this is maybe...
So wait, are we saying Jay Crowder ahead of Rondo too?
I think so.
Hero and even Dragic. Wow.
I mean, Rajon Rondo only played 20 minutes last series, a game. Like, you can't just, you know what I mean? Like, if you're on the floor the entire game, you're having more of an impact. And Rondo did have good moments, but it's not the most difficult thing to throw oops to Anthony Davis. Like, I'm not trying to take anything away from him, and he hit a lot of big shots in that series. But based off of his track record, do I think that he's going to shoot, over 40% from 3 and make all of his shots? And he's only attempting 6 shots a game. Like, I just think you can't have as big of an impact if you're not necessarily playing as much.
Harsh crowd. No, tough Rondo room.
I honestly think KCP is more important. I think KCP is more important to the Lakers than Rondo.
So I just made it the rest of my list. Let me just drop mine, then we can argue. So I think top 4 we said 5 would be Goran Dragic for me, 6 Tyler Hero, 7 Jay Crowder, and then 8 for me would be KCP, 9 would be Rondo, and then 10 is almost a toss up between Duncan Robinson and Iggy that we saw from the last 3 games.
Yeah, I think that's pretty fair. I mean, I'm not 100% sure Rondo even makes my top 10, to be honest.
Jesus.
Dude, he's only playing 20 minutes a game. We're talking about a bad shooter. He had good moments in the series, but like we have to take in the full sample size of like what's happening and like.
But what I would say to that, Nick, as a counterpoint,
it's got progressively worse.
Wait, but as a counter, as a counterpoint, Nick, wouldn't you say that the Lakers offense, since Rondo returned to the team in the bubble, has looked much better by just having another facilitator out there? I think
like with a bench unit, but like also I don't think LeBron's going to sit as much in the series as he probably did in the last one.
They had him in closing time though, a lot of those games too, didn't they?
I mean, they did, but I don't like that, especially against the zone. Like, if Rajon Rondo is going to hit threes and beat me, then it's going to be something I'm going to live with. Like, we can't ignore the fact of, like, who Rajon Rondo has been for the last 3 years. Yeah, he had a great series against Denver, but he hasn't really been a good player for, like, the last 2 years.
Oh, wow, aggressive.
It's straight facts.
We have Jay Crowder up there. We just said he shot 8 3-pointers a game, and what's he shooting, like 20%?
But he's giving you good wing defense. Like, he was a huge factor in that series in playing the zone. I thought he had a lot of great cuts. I mean, if someone wants to put Rondo in the top 10, that's fine with me. Like, KCP is a guy I think that's more important because you need that spacing for LeBron and AD, and you need to beat that zone. And I think beating the zone is easier if you have good three-point shooters on the floor.
I agree. I will concede that KCP is probably more important to the Lakers' overall success in the series than Rondo. I just, I don't know, man. I just
can I drop Rondo's stats? Can I drop Rondo's stats in the playoffs? So Rondo has played in 9 games to this point in time. Or no, 10 games, excuse me. 10 playoff games. He's averaging 9 points per game, 7.2 assists, 3.8 rebounds, 1.6 steals on shooting splits of 50, 44, and 54, shooting 7.2 times per game, 2.9 threes a game.
And how many minutes?
In 24 minutes per game.
And also, like, do we really think those are realistic numbers for Rajon Rondo to continue shooting that way?
Okay, the 3-point number is high. The 44, okay. I mean, I saw him in a step back 3 in one of those games. Like, he's a little bit out there. That I will give you the 3-point percentage does not seem feasible long term. But the playing 7 off the bench, I don't know. I mean, the assist numbers in the 9, 7, and 4 feels pretty realistic still all the same.
I don't even think he averaged 9, 7, and 4 during the season.
How many rings does Rondo have?
1.
Boom. There we go.
He averaged 7 points, 5 assists, shot 41% from the field and 32% from 3 during the season. Like, I get it, and I understand the impact he provides for them offensively and running the second unit, but I think in this series against the zone, maybe it's a little bit less impactful. He whatever, you can put him on the list in the top 10, but I still would take KCP over him.
Well, so wait, who would be on your?
I'd probably take Duncan Robinson over him too. If you asked LeBron who he would have on his team, I think he'd probably take Duncan Robinson over Rajon Rondo because the amount of spacing he would provide him would be huge.
Well, that's because LeBron's a serial cheater and he always wants somebody off the other team. That's more about LeBron's character flaws than it is about basketball analysis. He always wants what he can't have. I mean, we've discussed that at length before on this pod, I'm sure. But
I think Rondo will have a bigger impact if they play him more minutes. But like, I just think somebody who's playing 20 minutes, it's hard for him to be a top 10 most impactful player in the series.
In 1972, Willis Reed played for 2 minutes in the game 7 against the Los Angeles Lakers. He had 4 points and he had a bad ankle.
Thanks, the history lesson.
No, I'm kidding. You're right.
Well, wasn't it like he played and it like gave the team like confidence because he at least like went on the floor? So like I thought that was the angle you were trying to go with.
No. He just was out there for like 4 minutes. It's funny because Walt Frazier had like one of the best games in NBA Finals history. He had like a triple-double, and nobody talks about it. They talk about the fact that Willis Reed came out and hit his first 2 shots, and that was a wrap. But Walt Frazier was like 35, 10, and 12. Like, he had a ridiculous game. But anyways, I probably, push come to shove, without me just being an ass on this pod, Rondo's probably off the top 10. I think that's a fair assessment. And I think, as we mentioned at the top,
he's going to literally have the best series possible, and he's going to make me look stupid as hell. He's probably going to average 12 points,
I'm going to cook you on Twitter if it happens.
Field.
Rondo and I will be at your house.
He really might. I mean, we saw what he did to CP3, but what do you like? Well, we haven't really talked about the bigs. Like, did Dwight Howard get any contention for you, Kory, to be in the top 10 or no?
I did this. I did this list on the fly. So, I probably should have thought about Dwight a little bit more. Actually, no. Honestly, KCP, Rondo, and Dwight would probably be my final 10. I think actually I give Dwight more credit because he's going to be more valuable to the Lakers' success in this series because you can't just have AD going against Bam all day. So I actually think I'd probably edge KCP, Rondo, and Dwight as the final 3 top 10 players and push out Duncan Robinson, who I think could have a pretty no-show series if things were to go in the Lakers' favor. And then I think Iggy is, even though I liked how Iggy played those last 3 games, I don't know how feasible or how, I keep saying feasible, how likely it is that he's going to go 4 for 4 from 3 again.
Yeah, that's a great point. It'll be interesting, I think, with like a whole bunch of different elements with Dwight and how much they play him out there and like what goes on with him, and just looking at like how, like you said, how they match him up with Bam. Like, is he spending a lot of time? Is he playing a lot this series, or do they go small and they try to match with Miami, or are they kind of forcing their will on the game and forcing Miami to play a guy like Kelly Olynyk or whoever it might be? So, and it's interesting. I'll just say this about Duncan Robinson. We're like, he's the type of guy that I feel like he doesn't have to get stats to have an impact on the game because you literally have to chase him along the three-point line so long, and that's taking a defender away. And we saw the impact that had a lot in that Miami-Boston series because Goran Dragic and Bam were able to run pick and roll, and Weakside was not able to come and kind of put a hit on Bam rolling to the rim because it was Jaylen Brown stuck to Duncan Robinson's hip because they didn't want to give up that three-point shot. So that's where I look at Duncan Robinson's value, not necessarily always showing up in the stat sheet. You know, with those shooters, they're just guys that you have to account for all the time, and they just provide that different element of spacing.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I mean, the more I thought about it, maybe I pushed Jay Crowder down because that three-point shooting I don't think is going to get better next series. So maybe I'll pop him over KCP. But I feel like I'd have to have Duncan Robinson in my top 10 just because he's a guy that you have to account for so much. And it'll be interesting to see if Miami's able to expose him defensively like Boston did somewhat in the last series. But like I mentioned, I think it'll be easier to hide him in that zone against weaker wings, given you have Danny Green instead of Jason Tatum or Jaylen Brown.
Yeah.
Right.
But let's talk a little bit of X factors, guys. I know we've covered almost everything, but what are some X factors for you? For me, it's Rajon Rondo. No, just kidding.
I was going to say, clearly Rondo. I think we've discovered that it is, in fact, Rondo.
I mean, X as in players or just in terms of the game?
Everything.
So I think X factor for the Heat would be getting the Lakers in foul trouble. And I think an X factor for the Lakers would be limiting. Again, we talked about most of this, but limiting the 3-point shots by the Miami Heat, which kind of feels like a failed philosophy. If I'm telling the Heat to, whatever, you get the point.
I think it's also not just like limiting 3-point shots. It's limiting it to the guys that you want shooting threes. If Andre Iguodala is going to shoot threes or if Jay Crowder is going to continue to struggle, but you don't want to give those open threes to Tyler Hero or Duncan Robinson or even Goran Dragic. Even Jimmy Butler would give up open threes too because he doesn't even want to shoot them.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think for the entire series, just the 3-point shot. If the Lakers are hitting them, then I think they have a great path to it. Whoever's shooting better will probably win the series from the 3-point line. I think the Lakers can get by a little more than Miami without being great from the 3-point line, just because they have the 2 best players in the series. But I think that would be a key tell in the series. Whoever's shooting the 3-ball well, I think that'll just be an X factor. And it's weird to say this, but I think LeBron James will be an X factor. It's weird to say that as being, the best player in the world, but I just think, I think he, we're starting to see a little bit of his basketball mortality these last few seasons, and I don't know if he gets to 6, and I don't think he knows if he gets to 6, but I think he thinks, particularly where he's a prominent role, I'll say anyway, and I think he knows this is one that he can't let slip away, and so I think we're going to see a vintage LeBron James performance in this finals. I think he's going to come out just very laser focused. Like I say, it's going to be LeBron we probably haven't seen in a few seasons because I think he knows getting 4 and maybe an outside shot at 5 with Anthony Davis as a teammate, maybe some retooling, already thinking ahead. I think to how he gets another championship. But I think he'll be an X factor. How he comes out and plays, I think he's been been a facilitator, taken over when he's had to. But I think he's going to be locked in, sort of Cleveland, LeBron, get on my back, and I'm going to get us 4 wins and another notch on his belt.
Yeah, I like that. I think that's a really good X factor because, like you said, Jay, we haven't necessarily seen King James throughout the postseason. We saw it in that game 5 against Denver. He really turned it up and showcased he's going to put his will on this game and it's going to go how he wants it to go. And if he plays that way, it's going to be a short series for the Heat. There's not really a ton they can do about it when LeBron's playing at that level. The question is more so, can he do that, for 48 minutes consistently throughout an entire playoff series? We have to still see that. 3-point shooting, like you guys said, it's a huge impact in every series, specifically with the role guys or the guys that are so hot and cold when it's 3-point shooting, where you have the one game Jay Crowder's going to shoot 5 of 8 from 3. The next one he might be 0 of 8. And the same thing for the Lakers with Alex Caruso. Is he going to be 0 of 4? Is he going to be 2 of 5? What's going to be the difference in that? I think foul trouble is going to be huge. Because like Kory mentioned, the Heat have the ability to kind of force those fouls. They did it great against Boston. Jimmy Butler, that's probably one of his best traits. And given all the movements they have offensively, it kind of forces some of those off-ball fouls and things like that too. So if they get in foul trouble, if they get the Lakers in foul trouble, especially with guys like Dwight and McGee who are a little foul prone, like they're just guys that are always trying to block shots, and that leads to you getting some of those calls. But on the Lakers side, they can pretty much do the same thing because I think the easiest way to draw fouls is when you're physically stronger or bigger than the other guy. The only thing they can do sometimes to stop your shot is foul you. And we know that the Lakers have the bigger team. Even if they don't play Dwight Howard and JaVale McGee and Anthony Davis is your 5 and LeBron is your 4, that's still substantially bigger than what the Heat have. Bam's a center, but he's still, I think, only like 6'9", 6'10". Anthony Davis has that wingspan, has that length, and LeBron's just going to kind of body Jay Crowder or Jimmy Butler when it comes, push comes to shove, especially in the post. So I think the fouls are going to be huge in this series. Officiating has been pretty big in that last series. We saw a lot of complaints about the Lakers getting calls, and obviously the Heat in Boston series, there was plenty of complaints too with Kemba maybe not getting as many calls and stuff like that. But also it's going to be Jimmy Butler. Jimmy Butler is going to be an X factor similar to how LeBron was for the Lakers. I think is Butler going to be that guy? Is he going to be someone they can count on to get 20, 25 points and come up with those clutch possessions? Because there's also a couple clutch possessions in that Boston series where Jimmy Butler had, lackadaisical turnovers or just not able to get to his spots. In one of the fourth quarters, he airballed an elbow jumper. So, how he plays offensively is going to be huge. And just probably to finish it off will be Tyler Hero. I think he's a big enough X factor in what we saw in that Boston series, averaging 20 a game and having that 37-point outbreak. He's that extra score that Miami needs to kind of almost balance things out. But it's really hard to count on a rookie to be that guy.
For sure. And I also, just to add, I really like LeBron's mindset to end that last game. It was set. He told Haynes before the game that he was going to finish it tonight. And then after the game, he's seen, dabbing up Chris Haynes and saying, "I told you so." And how he went through all of the celebrating. There are so many photos that they took, and LeBron is dead ass not smiling. He looks like the Kobe serial killer. When they won the Western Conference Finals, a decade ago. And LeBron today has even spoke about the fact that he just he felt himself lock into a different zone, and how obviously it's been tough throughout the bubble, but the goal is ahead. And as him and Anthony Davis were saying after they finished off the Nuggets, the job isn't done yet. And I definitely like seeing that type of lock-in from LeBron, because it reminds me of that 2013 Eastern Conference Finals when we saw LeBron take over and dismantle that Boston Celtics team.
He just looked like the kid that wouldn't smile for picture day.
Yeah, no, he really did. He's making a play. Him and AD took a photo, just the two of them, and he refused to smile in just that photo even too. So I think just LeBron's mindset is something that I'm really watching, and just like you kind of mentioned, Jay, he is somewhat of an X factor, right? Because if he can, and as you double down on Nick, can he keep this up for a duration of a run? Because like we said, how many more of these runs does he have in him? When does that inevitable step back finally hit LeBron? Hopefully not anytime soon, but I would love to see him dominate in the NBA Finals one last time, if there's not more.
And I think another interesting X factor, just sorry to cut you off, Jay, would be Anthony Davis's offensive rebounding. I know defensive rebounding I'm not quite as concerned about, especially when you have Dwight and you have LeBron. But if you have AD going against his zone, my guy cannot come away with 0 rebounds in the first half when Jay Crowder or Jimmy Butler is boxing him out.
I was going to say to that, I was going to say something else, but when you brought that up, I was like, Jesus Christ, offensive rebound, defense. I think rebounds. I think we can start parsing them out, get them first, and then we'll talk about offensive and defensive rebounds. But no, I'm just laughing at what Kory said. About seeing sort of the sort of father time starting to maybe catch up with LeBron Still has flashes of brilliance, but I just laugh. I think it's most evident whenever he's driving. He doesn't really blow past people anymore. He just kind of runs them over and like block. And the guy's like, "Holy shit! He just ran over me." It's not the same smooth, drive to the basket. He's so quick, and then he, raises up and two-hand slam or whatever. It's just like barrel. It's like I do my kids in the driveway, right? It's not. It's pretty funny. But
one thing Kory and I were talking about with him too is like we're kind of used to seeing his shot get blocked now, where in the past it was never really a thing. Where like it used to be like you blocked LeBron.
The other day, he got blocked and he like still had it, so he like double dribbled or traveled. He came back down with it. I was like, Jesus Christ, this is all just yeah. It's he knows he's got to get 4. He's like, I can't let one slip away. I think he's got one on his resume that he let get away, 2011. The other ones that he lost, I think, will probably. You could argue 2015, depending on what the argument was, but I feel like 2016 cancels out 2015, right? Like, so if he has Kyrie and Kevin Love, what happens there? But if Draymond doesn't get suspended 2016, who knows? So yeah. But anyways, that's not what we're talking about. I just got off on a tangent.
But biggest question, what is your prediction for the series?
So a part of me wants to say Lakers in 5.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm gonna give Miami some more respect, and I'm gonna say the Lakers in 6. But I seriously think there's a strong possibility we see this over in 5. Because I think there is a world in which the Heat just can't hit their shots, their 3-pointers, and then their offense gets really stagnant. The Lakers already have a top-notch defense, and them having the best 2 stars in this series, I can see them just leading the way to finish this off in 5. But again, I'm going to give Miami some respect, and I'm going to say Lakers in 6.
I want to talk to you guys in 2 weeks because I'm going to shock the basketball world, and I'm going to say the Miami Heat will win the NBA championship against LeBron James and Anthony Davis and the Los Angeles Lakers in 6 games. You heard it here first. Yeah, Miami in 6.
I didn't see this. Wait a minute. You have not done enough on this pod to garner that. I don't think you threw everyone comfortable. You have not been hyping Miami up enough on this podcast to all of a sudden pick Miami.
Heel turn, my friend. Heel turn.
He was setting you up the entire show.
Oh, my God.
Miami in 6. I'm there.
I've gotten every Miami series wrong so far, except the Pacers one. No offense, Kory. But like against the Bucks, I thought they were going to lose. Against the Celtics, I thought they were going to lose. But it's just like hard to pick against LeBron here. I'm going to go with Lakers in 6. There is a world where I could see the Heat pulling the upset, but I think it would have less to do with LeBron and Anthony Davis and more to do with the rest of the roster construction. And we'd reevaluate like, wow, did Rob Pelinka really put this team together? Because I feel like they've overachieved given the rest of the roster and the pieces they have around LeBron and AD. You would think a team like that would have maybe multiple 40% three-point shooters or other guys you can kind of count on, or even just like a third offensive option that's consistent on a nightly basis, and they really don't. So that's where I think the Heat could come through because they have so many different elements. And, knock on wood, I don't want it to happen. But if Anthony Davis or LeBron James had to deal with an ankle sprain or something that minor that took them out a game or two, that'd be enough to change a series where, if the Heat were to lose somebody other than Bam, you could maybe see them still winning a game or at least still being competitive, maybe other than Bam and Jimmy. So I think like that's where the LA is so dependent on LeBron and Anthony Davis, where you could see them losing, especially with the way that Spoelstra is able to throw different looks and different schemes. And let's be honest, like Spo knows LeBron better than almost any other coach in the NBA. Coaching him at his peak, obviously he's kind of taken his game to another level since then. But I'm sure there's little details that he knows about LeBron that nobody else really knows.
Right.
What else would you guys say the Heat need to do if they were to pull the upset? Like, what is your expectation, Jay, for them to get to that point in winning this series? Like, what's going to happen?
So the Heat got to be super hot from 3. You need multiple big games. I think from Tyler Hero. I think you need a Duncan Robinson game. I think you need that sort of quintessential Jimmy Butler game, that one of those sort of signature fourth quarters where he takes over and is being aggressive at the rims, getting fouls, defensive steal. I mean, I think that's the biggest factor. I think the shooting. So shooting's one. I think if Bam Adebayo's play carry over from the Celtics series, and we see sort of like Pascal Siakam last year, where his ascension continues to happen during the finals. And so, in other words, if he takes the momentum, if Adebayo takes the momentum from the Celtics series in the Eastern Conference Finals and continues to elevate his game and make Anthony Davis work, because Anthony Davis hasn't been in these situations, right? He's sort of toiling and getting his numbers in New Orleans. Not to say that he's not a great player, but it's a different level, right? And so I think this is hard to say, but I mean hard to quantify. But I'll try. So I think they're guys like Jimmy Butler, like Chris Paul, like Kobe Bryant, like LeBron James, just serial killers, these dogs on the court, and no moment's too big. Then I think they're guys that don't really want to be in these moments. I think they say they do because that's what you're supposed to say, because they've been, since AAU basketball, watching guys say that and do that and watch Michael Jordan and Kobe, et cetera, et cetera. I kind of feel like Anthony Davis is kind of that dude in this sense. I think he's saying the right things, put it on my back, et cetera, et cetera. But I wonder
he's more
what
of a James Harden.
Like. Yes, I think that's right. And that's weird for me to say because, obviously he's 1 million times better player than I ever even dreamed of being. So I'm not trying to be critical of that. But just from what I've observed in these playoffs, I wonder. And so just thinking about what the perfect storm would look like, I think, he'd come out gangbusters game one. Everyone says, well, this is what's been happening in the entire playoffs, right, with Portland, with Houston, on and with Denver, right, on and on. Someone gets that game off the Lakers, and the Lakers get the next four, like gentleman sweep, right? But I think they get that one. I think Lakers come back. I think he'd even get, maybe the first two even. I'm not even going to go that far. And LeBron puts his head down and goes in LeBron mode to counter that heat attack. But I wonder if these other guys are up for the moment, right? I wonder if KCP's up for it. I wonder if Danny Green's up for it. I wonder if Caruso's up for it. So I think shooting, Jimmy Butler, Bam. So go down the list, right? Everything has to go right for the Heat to win this series. But I think it's possible.
Who's your final MVP in this world, Jay? Is it Jimmy Butler or is it Bam?
It's Bam.
Okay.
I think it's Bam.
I think that's would be the expectation, because as good as Jimmy can be, Bam is a guy that could get better and take that next step in the series and really make Anthony Davis work, like you mentioned, Jay, because he hasn't necessarily had to deal with a great defensive matchup. Like Paul Millsap, Nikola Jokic, like they're not going to defend Anthony Davis. Robert Covington, PJ Tucker, they have 6 inches on him. He has 6 inches on them. And then you go back to the Portland series, Nurkic, Hassan Whiteside, yeah, they might have the size and the length, but they're not even close to being quick enough to deal with Anthony Davis. So Bam is a guy that actually can match up with him. And if I'm the Heat, what I would look at in this series, going back to the bubble, Toronto and LA matched up, and their game plan really took AD out of the game. I want to say he had like 10 or 13 points, and it was like 2 of 9 from the field, and most of those points coming at the free throw line. So maybe look at some of that tape and see what you could do. But Kory, in your eyes, what would he have to do for an upset?
Along the same lines of majority of what Jay said. Jimmy Butler's got to be aggressive. He's got to be knocking down his jump shots. I think the 3-point shooters and the young guys, they have to be knocking down their shots. You can't see Jay Crowder taking 8 shots per game and only making 15% of them, or whatever that god-awful number was. So you need those guys to be collectively better. Really for Miami, it's your jump shot shooters need to be aggressive and the zone needs to be working. If the zone defense is being effective and you're limiting Anthony Davis and pretty much not allowing anyone outside of LeBron to beat you, that's the best case scenario for the Miami Heat to create an upset.
Yeah, I think the zone is going to be such a huge factor because the Heat can shut down the paint effectively, and they've been doing it all season long. So it's not something new for them, where a lot of these teams aren't used to changing up their defensive scheme, where Spo has these guys doing all different types of stuff throughout the game. And like we mentioned, that coaching matchup is going to be huge. And I think another factor would be Spo just severely out-coaching Frank Vogel. And then also Frank Vogel not necessarily having the tools on his roster to counter what Spoelstra is doing. Not to say that the Heat are more talented, but it just feels like he might have more tools to operate with.
Yeah.
But anything else, fellas, on this series?
It's going to be fun.
Jay was so adamant that Rondo needed to be a top 10 player, and then he picked the Miami Heat to win the series. I I can't. I'm still shocked. This was a flabbergasting performance by Jay.
Heel turn, baby. Heel turn. I went NWO style.
But as always, guys, a pleasure. Big thanks everybody for listening. You can catch us on all streaming platforms.
Peace out, Knuckleheads.